The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, 1,000 diamonds. One lie. She wasn't supposed to be there. At least that's what the woman in red decided. "Excuse me," the woman sneered, grabbing her champagne. Then she leaned closer, voice dripping with arrogance. "Be a dear and get me another glass, will you?" "That's your job, isn't it, waitress?" Gasps fluttered around the table. The young woman in the white dress froze, clutching the torn sleeve the other woman had just ripped open. Her eyes lowered, not out of fear, but control, because behind her, someone was watching. Her husband, the man no one dared to speak to unless spoken to. He set his glass down, the crystal stem cracking under his fingers, and when he stood, the entire ballroom went silent. "Did she just touch you?" His voice was calm. The lights flickered once, then twice, and every candle in the room went out. Screams filled the dark, because when the lights came back on, the waitress was standing behind her husband, and the woman in red was on her knees trembling, eyes wide with terror. Stay with me until the end, because what the guests saw next revealed why the world once feared his name. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. 3 hours earlier, Amara had been standing in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple white dress for the 5th time. The fabric was elegant but understated, nothing like the elaborate gowns that would fill tonight's charity gala. She preferred it that way. After 2 years of marriage, she still wasn't comfortable with the attention that came with being his wife. "You look beautiful," came a voice from the doorway. She turned to find her husband watching her with those eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. Even after all this time, he could make her breath catch with just a look. "I look like I'm trying too hard," she said, smoothing down the dress one more time. He crossed the room in 3 silent steps, his movements carrying that fluid grace that had first caught her attention in a coffee shop 2 years ago. Back then, she thought he was just another businessman with expensive tastes and perfect posture. She had no idea she was falling in love with something far more dangerous. "You look like yourself," he said, his hands settling on her shoulders. "That's all I've ever wanted." The charity gala was being held at the Meridian Hotel, one of those old money establishments where the wealthy gathered to feel better about themselves while writing checks they'd never miss. Amara had suggested they skip it entirely, but her husband had insisted they attend. Something about maintaining appearances and honoring commitments. She never questioned his decisions about these social events. He understood that world better than she ever would. The ballroom was exactly what she expected. Crystal everything, gold, accents, and women draped in jewels worth more than most people's homes. Amara felt the familiar tightness in her chest as they entered. These weren't her people. She was a kindergarten teacher from Brooklyn who happened to fall in love with a man whose world operated by rules she was still learning. "Remember what we discussed," he said quietly as they paused at the entrance. "Stay close to me. Don't engage with anyone you don't recognize. And if anything feels wrong, find me immediately." She nodded, though she never fully understood why he was so protective at these events. He claimed it was because his business dealings made him enemies, but sometimes she caught glimpses of something deeper. The way other guests looked at him, a mixture of respect and fear that seemed disproportionate for a successful entrepreneur. They made their way through the crowd, her husband's hand never leaving the small of her back. People nodded respectfully as they passed, conversations pausing mid-sentence. She noticed how quickly eyes would dart away when he looked in their direction. It was like watching people try not to stare directly at the sun. "Marcus," a voice called out. An older man in an expensive tuxedo approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd make it tonight." "Richard," her husband replied with polite coolness. "How could I miss supporting such a worthy cause?" Amara listened as they exchanged pleasantries about business and mutual acquaintances, but she could feel the undercurrent of tension between them. There were layers to these conversations she couldn't decode, references to things that seemed important, but were never explained. "And this must be your lovely wife," Richard said, turning his attention to her. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "Amara," she said, extending her hand. Richard took it, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "Charming. Marcus, you didn't mention she was so young." Something shifted in her husband's posture. It was subtle, but she'd learned to read these micro-expressions over their marriage. The slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible straightening of his shoulders. "If you'll excuse us, Richard, I see some people we need to speak with," he said, already guiding Amara away. "That was rude," she whispered as they moved toward the bar. "That was necessary," he replied. Richard has a tendency to overstep boundaries. She wanted to ask what that meant, but they were interrupted by the arrival of a couple she recognized from previous events. The Weatherbys, old money philanthropists who treated charity galas like competitive sport. Mrs. Weatherby immediately launched into a detailed account of her latest humanitarian project, speaking loudly enough for nearby tables to overhear. As the conversation dragged on, Amara found herself scanning the room. That's when she noticed the woman in red. She was stunning, the kind of beautiful that made other women feel suddenly inadequate. Her dress probably cost more than Amara's annual salary, and she wore it with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in any room. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Amara's attention. It was the way she was staring at them. Not casual observation, but focused study, like she was memorizing details for later use. "Excuse me," Amara said, interrupting Mrs. Weatherby's monologue about sustainable fashion. "I'm going to freshen up." Her husband's eyes found hers immediately. "I'll come with you." "It's fine," she assured him. "I'll be right back." The restroom was a marble palace with gold fixtures and fresh orchids on every surface. Amara stood at the mirror, not really seeing her reflection. Something about tonight felt different, charged with an energy she couldn't name. Her husband's protective instincts seemed heightened, and she'd noticed more security personnel than usual for a charity event. When she returned to the ballroom, she couldn't immediately spot her husband in the crowd. The Weatherbys had moved on, probably to find fresh ears for their stories. She stood at the edge of the room, searching for his familiar figure among the sea of black tuxedos. "Lost?" The voice came from behind her. She turned to find the woman in red approaching with predatory grace. "Just looking for my husband," Amara replied politely. "Ah, yes. The mysterious Marcus. You know, I've been watching you two tonight. Such an interesting couple." Something in her tone made Amara's skin prickle. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" The woman smiled, but it didn't warm her eyes. "Not yet. But I know you. Or rather, I know what you are. I'm not sure what you mean." "Playing innocent suits you," the woman said, circling closer. "But we both know you don't belong here, don't we? Among your betters?" Amara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd dealt with condescending wealthy women before, but this felt more personal, more targeted. "I belong wherever my husband is," she said firmly. "Your husband," the woman repeated, tasting the words. "Tell me, does he know about your little secrets? The things you try so hard to hide?" "I don't have any secrets." "Everyone has secrets, dear. Some are just better at hiding them than others." The conversation was interrupted by a server passing with champagne. The woman in red grabbed 2 glasses, downing one immediately before fixing her attention back on Amara. "You know what I think?" she continued, her voice growing louder. "I think you're exactly what you look like. A little nobody who got lucky. A charity case he picked up somewhere and dressed up to play pretend." People at nearby tables were starting to notice the exchange. Amara felt dozens of eyes turning in their direction, conversations quieting as guests sensed drama developing. "I think you should step back," Amara said quietly, trying to diffuse the situation. "Or what? You'll call for help? Cry to your husband?" The woman's voice dripped with contempt. "Face it, sweetheart. You're a waitress playing up, dress, and everyone here knows it." That's when she reached out and grabbed Amara's dress, her perfectly manicured nails catching the delicate fabric at the shoulder. The sound of tearing silk cut through the ballroom chatter like a knife. The room went dead silent. Every conversation stopped, Every fork paused halfway to waiting mouths. The only sound was Amara's sharp intake of breath as she clutched the torn fabric, trying to hold her dress together. "Oops," the woman said with mock concern. "How clumsy of me. But don't worry. I'm sure they have safety pins in the kitchen. That's where you belong anyway, isn't it?" The temperature in the ballroom plummeted 20 degrees in an instant. Breath became visible in the suddenly arctic air as crystal glasses began to crack from the cold. The ornate chandeliers above swayed without any wind, their crystals chiming against each other like warning bells. Amara stood frozen, still clutching her torn dress, but her shock wasn't from the ruined fabric. It was from what she felt behind her, a presence so ancient and powerful it made her knees weak. This wasn't the gentle man who brought her coffee in bed every morning. This was something else entirely. "Marcus," she whispered, but the name felt wrong in her mouth now. He moved past her with liquid grace, each step deliberate and predatory. The guests closest to them began backing away instinctively, their survival instincts recognizing a threat their conscious minds couldn't process. The woman in red, still smirking at her handiwork, hadn't yet realized the magnitude of her mistake. "Did you enjoy that?" His voice carried across the silent ballroom, soft as velvet and sharp as a blade. "Humiliating my wife in front of these people?" The woman finally looked up at him, her confident smirk faltering as she met his eyes. They weren't the warm brown Amara knew. They were silver now, reflecting the chandelier light like mirrors, and completely without human warmth. "I was just having a bit of fun," the woman stammered, suddenly less sure of herself. "No harm done. No harm done?" He repeated the words like he was tasting something bitter. "You laid hands on what belongs to me." The possessive way he said it should have bothered Amara, but instead it sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the supernatural cold filling the room. She'd never seen this to that tone from him before, never side of the man she'd married. "Look, I didn't know she was important," the woman said, scrambling to her feet. Her designer heels clicked frantically against the marble floor as she tried to put distance between herself and whatever was happening. "I thought she was just staff." Staff. The single word hung in the air like a death sentence. "You thought my wife was staff." That's when the lights went out. Complete. Darkness swallowed the ballroom. Not the gentle dimming of a romantic dinner, but absolute black that seemed to press against everyone's skin like a living thing. The screams started immediately. Hundreds of wealthy socialites suddenly reduced to terrified animals in the dark. But Amara could see perfectly. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. She could see every detail of the panicked crowd, every face twisted with fear, every expensive gown and tuxedo as clearly as if the sun was shining. Husband. More importantly, she could see he wasn't human. Had never been human. His skin was pale as moonlight now, flawless and luminous in a way that defied nature. His movements were too fluid, too quick, like he was dancing to music only he could hear. And his eyes, those impossible silver eyes, were fixed on the woman in red with the focus of a predator who'd found his prey. "Please," the woman whimpered, though she couldn't see what was stalking toward her through the darkness. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it." "You didn't mean anything by it," he repeated thoughtfully. How refreshing. Casual cruelty is so much more honest than calculated malice. Amara watched in fascination and growing horror as her husband circled the woman like a shark. Other guests were stumbling around in the dark, calling out for help, for light, for someone to explain what was happening. But their voices seemed muted, distant, as if the darkness itself was swallowing sound. "Do you know what I am?" he asked the woman in red, who was now backing toward the wall, her hands outstretched, trying to navigate by feel. "I don't understand," she gasped. "Of course you don't. Your kind never does until it's too late." He was directly in front of her now, though she still couldn't see him in the absolute darkness. "I am very old. Old enough to remember when your ancestors huddled around fires, telling stories about things like me to keep their children from wandering into the woods at night." The woman's breathing was coming in short, panicked bursts. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking about respect," he said, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am talking about the natural order of things. I am talking about what happens when someone forgets their place." Amara found herself moving without conscious thought, drawn toward the center of the drama like iron filings to a magnet. She should be terrified. Any sane person would be running for the exits. But instead, she felt oddly calm, as if some part of her had always known this moment would come. "Marcus," she said softly, and he turned toward her immediately. "You can see," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I wondered when it would manifest? When what would manifest?" But before he could answer, the woman in red made a fatal error in judgment. Desperate and disoriented, she lunged toward what she thought was an exit, but was actually Amara's direction. Her hands reached out wildly, seeking anything to steady herself, and her nails raked across Amara's exposed shoulder where the dress had been torn. The sound that came from Marcus wasn't human. It was a roar of pure rage that seemed to shake the building's foundations. Crystal glasses throughout the ballroom shattered simultaneously, sending fragments cascading to the floor like deadly rain. When the echoes faded, the only sound was the woman's terrified sobbing. "You touched her twice," Marcus said, and his voice was death itself. Once was an insult, twice was a declaration of war. The lights flickered back on then, dim at first, then gradually brightening until the ballroom was illuminated once more. But everything had changed. The elegant gathering had become a scene from a nightmare. Broken glass covered the floor, tables were overturned, and guests were pressed against the walls, staring in shock and terror at the scene unfolding before them. The woman in red was on her knees, exactly as Amara had envisioned in that first moment of darkness. But she wasn't alone. Standing behind her, his hand resting almost gently on her shoulder, was Marcus, except he looked different now, more himself somehow. The careful human mask he'd worn for 2 years had finally slipped. "Look around," he said to the woman, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. "See how they watch? See how they wait? They know what I am, even if they won't admit it to themselves. They've always known." Amara looked around and realized he was right. The terror on the guests' faces wasn't just from the darkness or the supernatural cold. It was recognition. On some primal level, every person in that room understood exactly what they were looking at. "What are you?" the woman whispered. Marcus smiled then, and Amara saw fangs. Not the subtle points of movie vampires, but genuine predators' teeth designed for tearing and killing. "I am the thing your nightmares forgot to remember," he said simply. "I am the shadow that watches from the corner of your eye. I am the reason humans invented crosses and garlic and running water. I am older than your family name, more powerful than your money, and infinitely less forgiving than your God." The woman tried to stand, but his hand on her shoulder kept her firmly in place. "But most importantly," he continued, his silver eyes finding Amara's across the room, "I am her husband. And you, my dear, just made the mistake of insulting my queen." The word queen hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Every guest in the ballroom felt it. The shift from expensive charity gala to something far more dangerous. The woman in red's face went from flushed embarrassment to sheet-white terror as the implications sank in. "Queen," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus tilted his head, studying her like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "Did I stutter? Or perhaps you need clarification on the hierarchy you just disrupted?" Amara watched her husband transform before her eyes. The gentle man who made her breakfast every morning, who worried when she worked late, who held her during thunderstorms, was gone. In his place stood something ancient and terrible, something that commanded respect through fear rather than love. "I run the Eastern Territories," he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. 12 states bow to my authority. 300 of my kind answer to my call. And this woman, The one you called a waitress is my consort, my equal, my everything. The guests pressed further back against the walls, some openly weeping now. They'd attended charity galas expecting pleasant conversation and tax deductions. Instead, they'd stumbled into a revelation that would haunt their nightmares for decades. You see, the thing about being immortal, Marcus said conversationally, is that you develop very specific ideas about respect. When someone disrespects what's mine, they disrespect me. And when they disrespect me, they challenge the natural order I've spent centuries establishing. The woman tried again to rise, but his grip tightened on her shoulder. Not enough to break bone, but enough to keep her exactly where she was. Please, I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. Just let me go. Apologize? Marcus laughed, and the sound sent ice through everyone's veins. To whom would you apologize? The waitress you thought you were humiliating? Or the queen you actually insulted? Amara found herself stepping forward without conscious thought. The broken glass crunched under her heels as she moved through the devastated ballroom, her torn dress trailing behind her like battle damage. Every eye followed her movement, guests too terrified to look away. Marcus, she said softly, and he turned toward her with those impossible silver eyes. My love, he replied, and his voice gentled instantly. The contrast was jarring, like watching a hurricane suddenly become a summer breeze. Are you hurt? She shook her head, still trying to process everything she'd learned in the last 10 minutes. I'm fine, but maybe we should talk about this privately. Of course we should, he agreed. But first, we need to address the insult to your honor. The woman in red whimpered, finally understanding that her wealth and connections meant nothing here. She wasn't dealing with someone who could be bought or intimidated by social pressure. She was dealing with something that existed outside human hierarchies entirely. What do you want? She gasped. Marcus considered the question with the same careful attention he gave important business decisions. What do I want? I want you to understand the magnitude of your error. I want you to appreciate the mercy I'm about to show you. And I want everyone in this room to remember this moment. He released her shoulder and stepped back, giving her space to stand. She rose shakily, her expensive dress wrinkled and stained with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said. You see, in my world, there are consequences for everything. Actions and reactions. You acted against my queen, so there must be a reaction. The temperature in the room dropped again, not to the Arctic levels of before, but cold enough that everyone's breath became visible. Amara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that her torn dress offered little protection against the supernatural chill. However, Marcus continued, my queen is merciful where I am not. She values human life in ways I've forgotten over the centuries. So I'll give you a choice. The woman looked between Marcus and Amara desperately, searching for some hint of what was coming. Choice 1, he said, holding up a finger. You can leave here tonight and never speak of what you've seen. You'll forget this incident entirely. Remember only that you had too much champagne and made a fool of yourself. Your life continues exactly as it was, but you never cross my path again. That didn't sound terrible. The woman's face showed the first glimmer of hope since the lights had gone out. Choice 2, Marcus continued, holding up a second finger. You can choose to remember everything, every detail of tonight, every word I've spoken, every revelation about what I am. But if you choose memory, you choose service. You become mine, body and soul, for the next century. The hope died instantly. A century? I'm being generous, he said with a shrug. Traditionally, the penalty for insulting royalty was death. I'm offering you extended life instead. Of course, it won't be the life you're accustomed to. No more charity galas, no more society parties. You'll serve in my household until I decide you've learned proper respect. Amara watched the woman's face cycle through emotions, desperation, calculation, and finally resigned terror. Neither choice offered real freedom, but one at least offered survival. I choose to forget, she whispered. Wise. Marcus nodded approvingly. Amara, would you like to do the honors? Amara stared at him blankly. Do what honors? The memory wipe, my love. It's one of your gifts, though you haven't learned to use it consciously yet. My gifts? The revelations kept coming, each one reshaping her understanding of herself and her marriage. What gifts? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since the confrontation began, it reached his eyes. Did you think I married you just for your beautiful smile? You're not entirely human, darling. Haven't been since the night we met. The memory hit her like lightning. Their first date, walking through Central Park after dinner. He'd been attacked by 3 men with knives, and she'd watched in horror as they'd stabbed him repeatedly. She'd screamed, reached out to help him, and something had happened. Light had poured from her hands, healing his wounds instantly. She'd convinced herself later that she'd imagined it all, that shock had made her hallucinate. But now, looking back with new understanding, she realized it had been real. All of it. You changed me, she whispered. I awakened what was already there, he corrected gently. The bloodline was dormant, but it was always part of you. I simply helped it surface. The woman in red was forgotten now, as Amara grappled with this new reality. She wasn't human, hadn't been fully human for 2 years. Her husband wasn't human either, and apparently neither were the rules that governed their marriage. What am I? She asked. You're a healer, Marcus explained, his voice filled with pride. One of the rarest supernatural bloodlines. You can mend wounds, cure diseases, and yes, modify memories when necessary. It's why I could never let anything happen to you. You're not just my wife. You're irreplaceable. Around them, the ballroom guests watched this intimate conversation with fascination and growing terror. They were witnessing secrets that weren't meant for human ears, revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew about the world. The woman, Amara said suddenly, remembering why they were having this conversation. Marcus followed her gaze to the trembling figure in red. Ah, yes. Our volunteer. Are you ready to try your gift consciously? Amara looked at the woman who'd humiliated her, who'd torn her dress and called her a waitress. Part of her wanted to refuse, to let Marcus handle this his way. But a larger part, the part that had spent 2 years learning to love a complicated man, knew that mercy was sometimes the strongest choice. What do I do? She asked. Touch her forehead, Marcus instructed. Focus on the memories you want to change. See them in your mind, then replace them with what you want her to remember instead. Amara approached the woman slowly, giving her time to process what was happening. This won't hurt, she promised. The woman nodded frantically, clearly preferring memory modification to whatever alternative Marcus might devise. Thank you, she breathed. Amara placed her palm against the woman's forehead and immediately felt the connection. Memories flowed between them like water, and she could see the entire evening from this stranger's perspective. The calculation behind the insults, the deliberate cruelty designed to humiliate someone she'd perceived as beneath her station. But she also saw deeper memories. A lonely childhood, parents who valued appearance over affection, a lifetime of using cruelty to mask her own insecurity. The woman wasn't evil, just broken in ways that made her lash out at easy targets. With careful precision, Amara began editing the evening. She left the charity gala, the beautiful ballroom, the expensive dress, but she replaced the confrontation with simple drunkenness, embarrassing but harmless. She softened the woman's memories of other people's reactions, making them sympathetic rather than terrified. When she was finished, she pulled her hand away and stepped back. The woman blinked, looking confused but no longer terrified. I think I had too much champagne, she said with an embarrassed laugh. Did I make a fool of myself? Nothing that won't be forgotten by morning, Amara assured her kindly. The woman smiled gratefully and made her way toward the exit, already forgetting why she'd been on her knees, or why her dress was stained with tears. By tomorrow, she'd remember only that she'd attended a lovely charity gala and perhaps drank a bit too much. With that crisis resolved, Marcus turned his attention to the remaining guests. They huddled against the walls like sheep, too terrified to move, but too fascinated to look away. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying easily across the silent ballroom, "you've witnessed something extraordinary tonight. You've seen behind the veil that separates your world from mine. The question now is what we do about it." A well-dressed man near the back of the room found his voice. "Are you going to kill us?" Marcus laughed, genuinely amused by the question. "Kill you? Why would I kill you? You're not threats. You're witnesses. And sometimes, witnesses serve a purpose." He walked to the center of the ballroom, broken glass crunching under his feet, and spread his arms wide. "Look around you. See what happens when someone forgets their place in the natural order. Remember this moment. Remember that there are things in this world older and more powerful than your money or your influence." The guests nodded frantically, clearly willing to remember anything he wanted them to remember. "But also remember this," Marcus continued, his tone softening slightly. "Power without restraint is tyranny. I could have killed that woman for her insult. I could kill all of you right now just because I can, but I choose mercy, because my queen values human life, and I value her above all things." He gestured toward Amara, who stood among the wreckage of the ballroom like a queen surveying her domain. Her torn dress had somehow become regal rather than ruined, her composure absolute despite everything she'd learned tonight. "Spread the word," Marcus commanded. "Tell your friends, your families, your business associates. Tell them that the old powers still walk among you. Tell them that respect is not optional, and that some insults carry consequences your lawyers cannot fix." The guests began moving toward the exits, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency, as they realized they were being dismissed. Within minutes, the ballroom was empty except for Marcus, Amara, and the scattered remnants of what had been an elegant charity gala. Silence settled over them like dust, broken only by the distant sound of car engines starting as the guests fled into the night. Amara stood in the center of the devastation, still processing everything that had changed in the space of an hour. "So," she said, finally, "we're not exactly a normal married couple, are we?" Marcus laughed, the sound echoing through the empty ballroom. "My darling," he said, moving toward her with that fluid grace that no longer seemed mysterious. "We were never going to be normal." He took her hand then, his fingers intertwining with hers as they stood among the wreckage. The gesture was so normal, so human, that for a moment she could almost forget what she'd just witnessed. Almost forget that the man she'd married was something far older and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. "Are you angry with me?" he asked quietly, his silver eyes searching her face. "For keeping this from you?" Amara considered the question seriously. She should be angry. 2 years of marriage built on secrets and half-truths. 2 years of thinking she was just a kindergarten teacher who'd gotten lucky enough to marry a successful businessman. 2 years of not knowing what she really was. "I should be," she said finally, "but I'm not. I think part of me always knew something was different about us, about you, about me." She looked down at her hands, remembering the light that had poured from them that first night. "The healing thing, it's happened before, hasn't it? Small things I convinced myself were coincidences." Marcus nodded. "Your students who recovered unusually quickly from injuries. The stray cat you found with the broken leg that was walking normally the next day. The elderly neighbor who mentioned his arthritis disappeared after you brought him soup." Each example hit her like a small revelation. She'd attributed all of it to luck or wishful thinking, but now she saw the pattern. The gift had been growing stronger, manifesting more frequently as she'd grown more comfortable with herself and her marriage. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. "Because I was selfish," he admitted without hesitation. "I wanted you to choose me for me, not because of what I could offer or what you might become. I wanted at least some part of our relationship to be real." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. Even now, surrounded by evidence of his supernatural nature, he was still the man who brought her coffee in bed every morning, still the one who worried when she worked late, who held her during thunderstorms. It was real, she said firmly. All of it. The only thing that wasn't real was pretending we were normal. Relief flooded his features. You're not afraid of me? I'm terrified of you, she said with a laugh that surprised them both. You just made a room full of powerful people wet themselves with fear. You have fangs. You're apparently some kind of vampire royalty. Of course I'm afraid. His face fell slightly. But I'm not afraid of you hurting me, she continued quickly. I'm afraid of what this means for us, for our life together. I'm afraid of the world you live in, the dangers I never knew existed. I'm afraid I won't be strong enough for whatever comes next. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle for someone who'd just demonstrated the capacity for terrible violence. You faced down a ballroom full of hostile strangers tonight. You used a power you didn't know you had to show mercy to someone who'd humiliated you. You stood by my side while I revealed truths that would drive most humans insane. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. Around them, hotel staff began creeping into the ballroom to assess the damage. They moved like ghosts, efficient and silent, clearly accustomed to cleaning up after supernatural incidents. Amara watched them work, realizing this probably wasn't the first time something like this had happened. How long have you been doing this? She asked. Running territories, commanding other vampires, living in this world? Officially, about 300 years. Unofficially, I've been building power since I was turned in 1847. He guided her toward the exit, his hand never leaving hers. The Eastern Territories were chaos when I arrived. Dozens of small factions fighting for scraps of influence. No organization, no rules, just endless violence. They walked through the hotel lobby, past guests who'd fled the ballroom and were now huddled in corners, whispering about what they'd witnessed. Some stared openly as Marcus passed, recognition and fear warring in their expressions. I united them, he continued as they reached the street, not through diplomacy or negotiation, but through demonstration of superior power. I showed them that cooperation was more profitable than constant warfare. Most of them came to see the wisdom in that arrangement. Their car was waiting, the driver holding the door with the same professional detachment as always. Amara wondered if he knew what his employer really was, or if supernatural secrets were just part of the job description. And the ones who didn't see the wisdom? She asked, as they settled into the back seat. Marcus's smile was sharp. Let's just say the territory has fewer factions now than it did 3 centuries ago. The drive home was surreal. They passed through familiar streets, past the coffee shop where they'd met, the restaurant where he'd proposed, the park where they walked every Sunday morning. All the landmarks of their normal life, except nothing about their life had ever been normal. The other vampires, Amara said suddenly, do they know about me? About what I am? Some suspect. Tonight confirmed it for anyone who was watching. Marcus's expression grew serious. Word will spread quickly through supernatural channels. By tomorrow, every vampire on the eastern seaboard will know I have a healer as my consort. The weight in his voice made her stomach clench. Is that bad? It's complicated. Healers are incredibly rare, incredibly valuable. Most haven't been seen for centuries. Having one marks me as either extremely powerful or extremely lucky. Either perception comes with its own challenges. Their building came into view, the penthouse windows glowing warmly against the night sky. Home. Except now she understood why they lived on the top floor of a building with such extensive security. Why Marcus had insisted on bulletproof glass and reinforced walls. What kind of challenges? She pressed. Other leaders will want to test whether I'm worthy of such a prize. Some will try to steal you, either through force or seduction. Others will attempt to use you against me, knowing that losing you would destroy me. His grip on her hand tightened. And then there are the hunters. Hunters. Humans who've made it their mission to eliminate supernatural threats. They've been relatively quiet lately, but a known healer will draw their attention like blood draws sharks. They'll see you as either a prize to be captured or a threat to be eliminated. The elevator ride to their penthouse felt like ascending toward a different life entirely. When the doors opened, even their familiar apartment looked different through her new understanding. The artwork wasn't just expensive, it was ancient. The security system wasn't just sophisticated, it was designed to keep out things far more dangerous than human intruders. "I need a drink," Amara announced, heading straight for their well-stocked bar. "Probably not wine," Marcus suggested with dark humor. After tonight, anything red might seem a bit too on the nose. She poured herself 3 fingers of whiskey instead, downing half of it in one burning gulp. The alcohol helped steady her nerves, though it did nothing to slow the racing thoughts in her head. "So what happens now?" she asked, settling onto their leather sofa. "Do I quit my job? Start wearing elaborate gowns and holding court? Learn to curtsy to other supernatural royalty?" Marcus laughed, the sound more relaxed than it had been all evening. "You can keep teaching if you want to. The children need you, and maintaining normal human activities provides good cover. Though you might want to be more careful about healing scraped knees too, obviously." He joined her on the sofa, pulling her against his side with familiar ease. Despite everything that had changed, this still felt right. His arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "There will be changes," he admitted. "More security, for one thing. You can't go anywhere alone anymore. Not until we're sure how various factions are going to react to your existence becoming public knowledge." "Various factions? Vampires aren't the only supernatural beings in the world, love. There are werewolf packs, fae courts, witch covens, demon clans. We all coexist in a delicate balance of power and mutual deterrence. A known healer disrupts that balance." Amara felt the whiskey burn in her stomach as the full scope of her new reality settled over her. It wasn't just about vampires and late-night charity galas. There was an entire, hidden world she'd stumbled into, complete with politics and dangers she couldn't even imagine. "Are they all as terrifying as you were tonight?" she asked. "Some are worse," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Some are better. Most are just trying to survive in a world that would kill them if humans knew they existed. But they're all dangerous in their own ways." The apartment's security system chimed softly, indicating someone was requesting access to their floor. Marcus tensed instantly, his casual demeanor evaporating as his supernatural senses engaged. "Expecting someone?" Amara asked, though his expression already gave her the answer. No. He was off the sofa in one fluid motion, moving toward the wall panel that controlled their building's defenses. "Stay here. Don't move until I tell you it's safe." The intercom crackled to life, and a woman's voice filled their apartment, smooth, cultured, with an accent Amara couldn't place. "Marcus, darling, I know you're home. We need to talk." Marcus's entire body went rigid. "Impossible," he breathed. "Who is it?" Amara whispered, though something in the tone of that voice made her skin crawl with instinctive dread. "Someone who should be dead," Marcus, hovering over, replied, his hand what looked like a panic button. "Someone I killed personally 3 decades ago." The voice came again, patient and amused. "I can hear you whispering, you know. Both of you. Hello, little healer. I've been so looking forward to meeting you. My name is Cassandra Blackthorne, and I have a proposition for your husband that I think you'll find quite interesting." Marcus's face went pale, an impressive feat for someone who was already undead. "Cassandra Blackthorne died in 1994. I watched her burn. Did you now?" The voice carried a hint of laughter. "How careless of you not to make sure the job was finished. May I come up, or shall I simply take the elevator by force? Your building's security is impressive, but hardly sufficient to keep out someone of my age and experience." Amara watched her husband wrestle with the decision, his supernatural instincts clearly screaming warnings. Finally, his shoulders sagged slightly in resignation. "What do you want, Cassandra?" "To congratulate you on your recent acquisition, of course. A healer, Marcus. After all these centuries, you've managed to find yourself a genuine healer. How wonderfully convenient." The malice in that last word made Amara's blood turn to ice. This wasn't a social call. This was a threat, delivered with silk-wrapped courtesy. And to discuss the future, Cassandra continued. Because you see, darling, the balance of power has shifted tonight. Every supernatural being on this continent now knows you have something they want, something they need, something they'll kill for. Marcus met Amara's eyes across the room, and she saw something there she'd never seen before. Not just concern or protectiveness, but genuine fear. The game has changed. Marcus, Cassandra's voice purred through the intercom, and I'm here to make sure you understand the new rules before someone less civilized comes calling. The apartment fell silent except for the soft hum of the security system and the thundering of Amara's heartbeat in her ears. Outside their windows, the city sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing a human who had no idea that their world had just tilted on its axis. "Let her up," Amara said quietly. Marcus spun toward her in shock. "Absolutely not. You don't understand what she is, what she's capable of." "I understand that she's not going away," Amara replied, surprising herself with her steady tone. "I understand that running or hiding won't solve anything, and I understand that I need to learn about this world I'm now part of, even the dangerous parts." She stood, smoothing down her torn dress with as much dignity as she could manage. Besides, if she wanted us dead, she wouldn't have announced herself. She wants something, and the only way to find out what is to talk to her. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, conflict playing across his features. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You're right, but the moment things go wrong, you get behind me and let me handle it. Promise me." "I promise." He pressed the button that would grant access to their floor. "She's on her way up." Amara poured herself another whiskey, then poured one for Marcus as well. If she was about to meet someone who'd supposedly died 3 decades ago, someone who made her ancient vampire husband nervous, she was going to need all the liquid courage she could get. The elevator chimed softly, announcing their visitor's arrival. Marcus positioned himself between Amara and the door. Every muscle in his body coiled for violence. The apartment's lights dimmed slightly, as if responding to the supernatural tension building in the air. 3 soft knocks echoed through the space. "Come in, Cassandra," Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the fear Amara could sense radiating from him. "Let's discuss these new rules of yours." The door opened, and Amara got her first look at the woman who'd just turned their lives upside down once again. She was stunning in the way only immortal beings could be, with silver hair that caught the light like spun moonbeams, and eyes the color of winter storms. She wore a perfectly tailored black coat that probably cost more than most people's cars, and she moved with the kind of predatory grace that made Marcus look almost clumsy by comparison. "Marcus," she said warmly, as if greeting an old friend rather than someone who'd apparently tried to kill her. "You look well. Married life agrees with you." Her gaze shifted to Amara, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "And you must be the little healer everyone's talking about. My dear, you have no idea the chaos you've unleashed just by existing." Cassandra stepped into their apartment uninvited, her eyes taking in every detail with the practiced assessment of a predator mapping territory. "We have so much to discuss." Cassandra glided through their living space like she owned it, her fingertips trailing along expensive furniture with casual familiarity. The scent that followed her was intoxicating and wrong, like roses blooming in a graveyard. "Lovely place," she murmured, pausing at their wedding photo on the mantelpiece. "Though I must say, the security system could use an upgrade." I walked through it like morning mist. Marcus kept himself positioned between Cassandra and Amara, though his visitor seemed more interested in cataloging their possessions than making threats. "You said the game has changed. Explain." "Always so direct." Cassandra laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "That's what I always admired about you, Marcus. No patience for subtlety or social graces, just straight to the throat of the matter." She turned from the photograph. her storm-colored eyes fixing on Amara with predatory interest. Tell me, little healer, do you understand what you've become tonight? Not just revealed, but become. I'm not sure what you mean, Amara replied carefully. Of course you don't. They never do. Cassandra moved closer, ignoring Marcus's warning growl. You see, darling, there are rules to our world. Ancient agreements that keep the peace between species. Treaties signed in blood and witnessed by beings whose names would drive humans mad just to hear them spoken. She paused beside their floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights below. One of those rules concerns healers. Specifically, what happens when one manifests their abilities publicly. The temperature in the room continued to drop, frost beginning to form on the windows despite the late spring weather. Amara pulled her torn dress closer, suddenly aware that her breath was becoming visible. Get to the point, Cassandra, Marcus demanded. The point, my dear Marcus, is that your wife just became the most valuable commodity on the supernatural market. Every faction leader from here to California is already making plans to acquire her services, some through negotiation, others through less civilized means. She turned back to face them, her smile sharp as winter. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that her public manifestation has triggered something called the Conclave Clause. Marcus went absolutely still. Even his breathing seemed to stop. No, that hasn't been invoked in over 2 centuries. What's the Conclave Clause? Amara asked, though the dread building in her stomach suggested she didn't want to know. Cassandra clapped her hands together with delight, like a teacher whose student had asked exactly the right question. Oh, this is delicious. He hasn't told you about the old contracts, has he? The agreements that govern how supernatural territories are maintained and transferred? Cassandra, Marcus's voice, carried a warning that would have sent lesser beings fleeing. Don't. But I must, darling. She has a right to know. Cassandra moved to their bar, helping herself to a glass of their most expensive whiskey. The Conclave Clause states that when a healer of sufficient power manifests publicly within established territory, any supernatural leader may challenge the current ruler's right to that territory. Winner takes all, including the healer. The glass in Marcus's hand shattered. Blood, darker than human blood, dripped from his palm onto their white carpet. Who's called for the challenge? Oh, several someones. The werewolf pack from the Northern Territories sent word an hour ago. The Fey Court is convening as we speak. And naturally, the Vampire Council of the Americas has scheduled an emergency session for tomorrow night. Cassandra sipped her whiskey appreciatively. Excellent vintage, by the way. Amara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. They want to fight Marcus for me? Not just for you, sweetheart. For everything. Marcus controls 12 states worth of supernatural territory. That's power, influence, and resources beyond human comprehension. Having you as his consort legitimizes any challenger's claim to that territory. She set down her glass and approached Amara directly, ignoring Marcus's increasingly dangerous posture. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. According to the old laws, you have a choice in this matter. What kind of choice? You can declare yourself an independent agent, refuse all claims of protection or ownership, offer your services freely to whoever needs healing, regardless of faction or territory. Cassandra's eyes gleamed with malicious amusement. Of course, that would mean giving up Marcus's protection entirely. You'd be fair game for anyone strong enough to take you. Marcus moved faster than Amara's eyes could track, his hand around Cassandra's throat in an instant. You're trying to manipulate her. I'm giving her information, Cassandra replied calmly, apparently unbothered by the fingers that could crush her windpipe. Something you should have done years ago instead of keeping her ignorant and helpless. I was protecting her. You were being selfish. Cassandra's voice remained conversational despite the hand at her throat. And now your selfishness has created a situation that could destabilize the entire eastern seaboard. Marcus released her with obvious reluctance. Cassandra smoothed her coat, completely unruffled by the threat of violence. There is, however, a third option, she continued as if nothing had happened. One that could solve all of our problems quite elegantly. And that is? You could ally yourself with me. Cassandra's smile was pure predator now. My return from supposed death has created quite a stir in certain circles. Combine that with your healer, and we'd have enough power to discourage any challenges. A partnership, if you will. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. Partnership? You mean you want me to hand over half my territory in exchange for your help keeping the other half? I want you to be realistic about your situation. You're about to face challenges from every major supernatural faction in North America. Some of those challengers are older than you, stronger than you, more cunning than you. The werewolf alpha who's coming is over 600 years old. The Fae representative literally helped write the laws we're operating under. And don't get me started on what the Vampire Council is planning. She moved back to the windows, her reflection ghostly in the frost-covered glass. But together, we could present a united front. My political connections combined with your raw power and her healing abilities. No one would dare challenge that combination. What would you want in return? Amara asked, surprising both vampires. Smart girl, Cassandra approved. I want the Southern Territories. Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas. Marcus has never paid proper attention to them anyway, too focused on his northern power base. Give me those states and official recognition of my authority there, and I'll help you keep the rest. Absolutely not, Marcus said immediately. Then enjoy your war, Cassandra replied with a shrug. Because make no mistake, darling, that's what's coming. Open supernatural warfare on a scale not seen since the Treaty of Shadows was signed in 1823. She moved toward the door, pausing to look back at them. You have until tomorrow's full moon to decide. After that, the challenges begin whether you're ready or not. And if we refuse your offer, then I'll be forced to throw my support behind whoever seems most likely to win. I've invested too much in returning from the dead to back the losing side now. Her smile was razor sharp. Nothing personal, you understand. Just business. The door closed behind her with a soft click that seemed to echo through the suddenly too quiet apartment. Marcus stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the space where she'd been. Marcus? Amara's voice seemed to break some kind of spell. We need to leave, he said suddenly, all business now. Tonight, pack only what you absolutely need. We can't stay here. Leave? But this is our home. This is a target now. Every supernatural being in the city knows where we live. Cassandra walking through our security like it was tissue paper proves how vulnerable we are here. He was already moving, pulling out suitcases from their bedroom closet. Amara followed him, her mind reeling from everything that had happened. 3 hours ago, she'd been getting dressed for a charity gala. Now she was apparently the prize in some supernatural power struggle that could reshape the entire eastern seaboard. Where will we go? I have safe houses, places that are properly warded against supernatural intrusion. We'll hole up in one of those while I figure out our next move. He was throwing clothes into bags with mechanical efficiency, his movements sharp and precise. What about the challenges? Can you really fight all these people? Marcus paused in his packing, his shoulders sagging slightly. Some of them, yes. Others, he met her eyes in the mirror. The werewolf alpha Cassandra mentioned is named Fenris Blackmoon. He's been alive since the 14th century. I've seen him tear apart opponents who were supposed to be his equal. And the Fae? Lady Silvermoon. She's not just old. She's one of the original architects of supernatural law. Fighting her would be like trying to argue legal precedent with the person who wrote the Constitution. He resumed packing, his movements more agitated now. Amara grabbed his hands, forcing him to stop and look at her. So we accept Cassandra's offer? I don't trust her. She didn't survive whatever killed her 30 years ago just to play fair now. She wants something more than territory, and she's using this crisis to get it. But if the alternative is fighting enemies we can't beat, there might be another way. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. I need to make some calls. Reach out to allies. See who might be willing to stand with us rather than against us. You have allies? A few. Other territorial leaders who benefit from the current power structure. Some of the older vampires who remember what chaos looked like before the territories were established. Maybe some of the neutral factions who don't want to see a war. He was already dialing. Pack everything you think we'll need. We leave in 20 minutes. As Amara threw her belongings into suitcases, she could hear Marcus making rapid-fire phone calls. His voice was calm and authoritative, but she could sense the urgency beneath his professional demeanor. Words like emergency and immediate assistance kept filtering through from the next room. She paused at her jewelry box, staring at the simple gold wedding band that had seemed so significant just hours ago. Everything about their marriage, their life together, had been built on foundations she'd never known existed, yet somehow, that didn't make it feel less real. Amara. Marcus appeared in the doorway, phone still pressed to his ear. We have a problem. What now? The werewolves aren't waiting for tomorrow. Fenris and his pack crossed into our territory an hour ago. They're heading straight for the city. He ended his call, immediately dialing another number, and the Fae delegation just materialized in Central Park, without permission from any human or supernatural authority. The apartment's security system began chiming urgently, not the gentle tone that announced expected visitors, but the harsh warning that indicated an actual breach. Marcus cursed in what sounded like Latin. How many are coming? Amara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Everyone. Marcus was at the window now, peering through the frost at the street below. The challenges aren't waiting for formal declarations. They're coming tonight. Amara joined him at the window and immediately understood his concern. The street below, normally quiet at this late hour, was filled with figures moving with predatory purpose. Some looked human from this distance. Others definitely didn't. The fire escape, Marcus said suddenly. We can get to the roof, then to the neighboring building. There's a helicopter pad 2 blocks over. You have a helicopter? I have several helicopters, and boats, and safe houses in 12 different countries. He was grabbing weapons now, things she'd never seen before that had apparently been hidden throughout their apartment. When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to prepare for every contingency. The elevator chimed, then it chimed again, and again. Multiple cars bringing multiple visitors who hadn't bothered to ask permission. Too late for the fire escape, Marcus muttered, checking the magazine on what looked like a very non-standard handgun. They're covering all the exits now. A new sound joined the security alarms. Howling, not from dogs, but from things that had once been human and were now something far more dangerous. The sound echoed off the surrounding buildings, answered by similar calls from multiple directions. The pack is announcing their presence, Marcus explained grimly. Traditional werewolf challenge protocol. They're giving us a chance to surrender before they come up, and if we don't surrender, then they come up anyway, but angrier. The apartment's intercom crackled to life again, but this time it wasn't Cassandra's cultured tones. The voice that emerged was deep, rough, with an accent that sounded like it came from somewhere cold and northern. Marcus Nightshade, I am Fenris Blackmoon, Alpha of the Northern Pack. I claim right of challenge for your territory and all that lies within it. Present yourself for combat, or be declared forfeit by cowardice. Another voice joined the first, this one musical and otherworldly in a way that made Amara's teeth ache. Marcus of the House of Night, I am Lady Silvermoon of the Winter Court. I invoke the ancient laws and claim right of succession to these lands. Submit to judgment or face the consequences of defiance. More voices joined the chorus. Vampire lords, demon princes, witch covens, each one claiming ancient rights and demanding immediate satisfaction. The apartment filled with supernatural static as multiple powerful beings tried to use the intercom simultaneously. They're not waiting for formal challenges, Marcus said, loading what looked like silver bullets into his weapon. This is going to be a free-for-all. Can we fight them all? No, but we can make it expensive for whoever wins. He handed her a small device that looked like a cross between a phone and a grenade. Dead man switch. If something happens to me, press the red button. It'll teleport you to a safe location and send out a distress call to my remaining allies. I'm not leaving you. You might not have a choice. The building shuddered as something large and powerful hit the lobby level. They're coming up the hard way now. The lights went out. Not the controlled darkness Marcus had created at the charity gala, but the chaotic black of a power grid being torn apart by forces that didn't care about human infrastructure. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. "Stay behind me," Marcus ordered, moving toward their reinforced front door. "Whatever happens, don't try to heal anyone who isn't clearly on our side. Some of these beings can turn healing energy against the healer." The building shook again, harder this time. Somewhere below them, glass was breaking and metal was being torn apart like paper. Multiple somethings were making their way up through the building, and none of them were bothering with elevators. "Marcus," Amara said quietly. "Yes, I love you, whatever you are, whatever this becomes. I love you." He turned to look at her, and for just a moment his supernatural mask dropped completely. He was just a man who was terrified of losing the woman he'd moved heaven and earth to protect. "I love you too," he said simply. "More than territory, more than power, more than my own existence." The apartment door exploded inward, and so, in that moment when their apartment door shattered into 1,000 pieces, Amara understood something profound. She wasn't just a kindergarten teacher who'd stumbled into a supernatural world. She wasn't just a healer caught between warring factions. She was a queen who'd finally awakened to her own power, standing beside a king who'd chosen love over empire. As ancient enemies poured through their doorway and the city burned with supernatural fire below, Marcus reached for her hand one final time, because sometimes the most dangerous thing in any room isn't the monster everyone fears. It's the person they underestimated, the person they called a waitress, the person who turned out to be so much more.